Hey guys, what's up? My name is Zach, and today we're going to be doing a 2020 election prediction between Andrew Cuomo and Donald Trump. So as most of you probably know, I've been off for the past few days, and this is because my old computer just stopped working out of nowhere, just turned off and wouldn't turn back on. So I have a new laptop, and as you can probably tell, the audio is very different. I don't know if it's necessarily worse, but I personally don't really like it compared to my other computer. I thought the audio quality of my other computer was very good. So soon I'll be getting a mic or a headset rather, and that should hopefully fix the audio problem. But for now, if you guys don't like or like this audio, just let me know, just so I can know whether or not I can gauge on that. Alright, so let's just get right into it. So as most of you probably know, Andrew Cuomo is the current governor of New York. He's been in that position for the past few years, I believe, and I think that he would be a very, very bad candidate for the Democrats to run. I think there's very few others who would do worse than him, and this is mostly because he's really in the same and seen in the same way as someone like Nancy Pelosi is. He's seen as an elitist, and he's seen as a Democratic Party insider, which would turn off most of the Rust Belt, which would turn off a number of states that the Democrats need in order to win in 2020. So to start off, Oregon would not be safe in Cuomo's column, neither would Connecticut, and neither would that 1st District in Maine. And this is because these are all areas where they have a certain resentment towards Democratic elitists, like typically solid Democratic states like Oregon, like Connecticut, like Maine's 1st. These are areas that would slip out of Cuomo's column because they would see him as a Democratic insider and as corrupt. Some states that would be safe in Trump's column would be Texas and Georgia. And this is because Cuomo, not in a million years, well, probably in a million years, I mean, who knows how these states will shift in the few election cycles, but Cuomo would never win in Texas and in Georgia, at least not in 2020. And this is mostly because he represents the part of the Democratic Party that the right uses against the Democrats in general, the Nancy Pelosi Democrats and the literal Andrew Cuomo Democrats. And I think that the only other candidate, the only other hypothetical candidate that can do worse than Andrew Cuomo would be Nancy Pelosi. And Nancy Pelosi is hasn't even mentioned running in 2020, and Cuomo has mentioned it as a serious possibility. So he's probably the worst likely candidate for the year 2020 for the Democrats. So the states of Texas and Georgia would not go in Cuomo's column at all, would go solidly in Trump's column, and this is mostly because he has virtually no minority appeal and virtually no crossover appeal to those moderate Republicans, and he would definitely cut whatever Democratic turnout he would receive in these states in half. I think that he would receive even less turnout than Hillary Clinton did in both these states. So going over to Oregon, let's just switch the color palette. I still think that this state would be likely in Cuomo's column. Connecticut would probably be likely in Cuomo's column. Same with Maine's 1st, and this is mostly because these are typically solid Democratic states, and the only way that any Democrat could lose these states is if there's some sort of really big scandal, or if there's some sort of really big catastrophe right as the election starts to go underway. But Cuomo would definitely cut turnout in these states, and Trump's margins would be definitely larger than 2016 in Oregon, Connecticut, and Maine's 1st. Alright, so going over to North Carolina, this would be likely in Trump's column for the same reasons that I've repeated over and over again for Cuomo on why he's a bad candidate. Cuomo would not have African American appeal in North Carolina. He would not be able to appeal to those moderate Democrats. Well, maybe to some moderate Democrats, but he'd definitely cut moderate Democratic turnout and Democratic turnout in general in this state. Along with Republican turnout, I can easily see moderate Republicans who maybe do not support Trump. Sorry, I still have a bit of a scratchy throat. Those moderate Republicans in North Carolina who maybe don't have a very high approval of Trump would still vote for him just because Cuomo would not be able to appeal to them as well as Trump would. Go over to Arizona, virtually the same logic on why for North Carolina would apply to Arizona. Those moderate Republicans who do not approve of Trump currently would still vote for him, and Cuomo would definitely cut Democratic turnout, making the state go likely in Trump's column. Maine's 2nd, I would consider to be likely in Trump's column. We saw this district go solidly in Trump's column during 2016, and if Cuomo was on the ticket, I think he would win by an even larger margin in that 2nd district, making it go likely in his favor. Nebraska's second and Iowa both considered to be likely in Trump's column, and this really comes down to the fact that Cuomo has no Midwestern appeal whatsoever, because that is predominantly made up of moderate Republicans, and Cuomo would not be able to appeal to those moderate Republicans as a result of his elitist status and his Democratic insider status, which would turn off a number of Republicans, or moderate Republicans especially. Going up to Ohio, I would consider this to be likely in Trump's column as well. And again, this state is mostly dominated by moderate Republicans, and Cuomo would turn off a number of those moderate Republicans, and Trump's base would also go to Trump, obviously, and whatever very little Democratic base. There's a solid Democratic base in this state, obviously because it's a flip state, but that Democratic base would be cut in half if Cuomo was on the ticket, making the state go likely in Trump's column. Going over to Wisconsin, I would also consider this state to be likely in Trump's column. I think that Cuomo would cut Democratic turnout in this state, and I think that registered Republicans would flock to Trump. Trump Republicans, moderate Republicans alike, would go to Trump in this state, making it go likely in Trump's favor. Now moving over to leans, Nevada, I would call leaning in Trump's column, and this is because Cuomo is a New York Democrat and a Nancy Pelosi Democrat especially, and that would turn off a number of Democrats and Republicans alike in this state, making it go into Trump's column. And we've seen this state trend more and more towards Trump in the past few months, going down to -4 in approval, or net approval. So for all those reasons, I would call leaning in Trump's column. New Hampshire, I'd also call leaning in Trump's column. Cuomo, I don't think would have very strong appeal to New Hampshire as a result of his Nancy Pelosi Democratic status, which would turn off a number of Democrats and Republicans alike in New Hampshire. New Hampshire in general despises Nancy Pelosi Democrats, and for that main reason, Cuomo would lose New Hampshire at large. Going down to New Mexico, I think that Cuomo would narrowly take New Mexico. This is mainly as a result of Trump's very low approval in this state. I think that would narrow. I think that would come down to like a margin of 3 or 4 percentage points in this state between who wins it, but I think that Cuomo would be able to edge it out narrowly. Same with Virginia. This state has a very solid Democratic base, which I think that Cuomo would cut in half, but even then, I would call this state leaning in Cuomo's column, or as a result of Trump's very low approval in this state, and as a result of its Democratic status in general. Maine's 2 electoral votes, and Maine's first. Oh, I didn't mean to call Maine's first that early. I think that Maine's 2 electoral votes and that first district would go to Trump, and this is because, virtually for the same reason as Cuomo would lose New Hampshire, this state despises Nancy Pelosi Democrats and despises Democratic insiders especially, and I think that Cuomo would turn off a number of Democrats, and I think that a number of Republicans would turn out despite Cuomo over to Trump, making the entire state go to Trump. Going down to Pennsylvania, I would call Pennsylvania leaning in Trump's column, giving him the victory, 274 electoral votes. And this really comes down to the fact that Pennsylvania, in general, despises New York Democrats. I think that Cuomo would be able to do moderately well in the urban areas, but I think that even then, urban area turnout would be cut in half. I think that he would do miserably in the suburban areas, and I think he would do miserably in the rural areas, and I think that Trump would win this state by an even larger margin than he did in 2016, making it go leaning in Trump's column. Michigan, I would call leaning in Trump's column. I think that it'll become close in this state, but in the end, I think that Cuomo's Democratic elitist status and his association with Nancy Pelosi in general would cost him the state at large. Same with Minnesota, giving the entire Rust Belt to Trump, which makes sense. Minnesota I would give to Trump because I think that although there is a solid Democratic base in the state, Cuomo would cut it in half as he would with the entire country in general, and those moderate Republicans would flock to Trump. And as you can see, the entire Rust Belt will go into Trump's column in this prediction, and this makes sense. In general, the Rust Belt does not favor Nancy Pelosi Democrats. They despise Nancy Pelosi Democrats, I think, for the most part, which makes sense. I forgot to call Florida. I meant to call that much earlier. I would call it leaning in Trump's column. The only reason it's not likely, and I never call Florida likely for either candidate, is because of how unpredictable the state is. I think that Florida is the most unpredictable state in the union, which is why I always call it leaning in either candidate's column when I do call it. But I think that Cuomo would absolutely lose Florida as a result of his Nancy Pelosi affiliation and his Democratic insider affiliation. I think that he would have no Hispanic turnout, which would be a big factor in losing this state. And I think that the moderate Republicans and the Trump base in this state would flock to Trump, making it go leaning next column. Actually, I'm going to call it likely, and this is mostly because of the fact that Cuomo will get no Hispanic turnout, as I said before. He would cut Democratic turnout in half, and Trump's approval is at +1, which may be a very small lead, but it has been consistently above 50% in the state. So for all those reasons, I would call Florida likely in Trump's column. Now going over to Colorado, I would call this state leading in Trump's column as well, and this is mostly because as I said before in talking about Nebraska and Iowa, Cuomo would have virtually no Midwestern appeal. He would cut turnout amongst Democrats, and he would peak turnout amongst moderate Republicans. And to Trump, I think that a number of Republicans would turn out despite Cuomo to vote for Trump, just because of how little appeal Cuomo has throughout the entire country, making the state leaning in Trump's column. Alright, so this is the prediction. As you can see, Cuomo would do completely miserably. He would get annihilated in an election against Trump, and this is mostly because I think that he is the second worst Democratic candidate. The only candidate I think that would be worse than Cuomo is Nancy Pelosi. And as you can see here, this electoral map reflects it very well. I think that in my Nancy Pelosi prediction, I had her do. Oh, and I should probably, yeah, actually, New Jersey I would consider to be likely in Cuomo's column. I should have discussed that state more, but that's the end of the video. If you guys have any questions about New Jersey, please leave them down below. But New Jersey would absolutely not be safe in Cuomo's column. I'm a bit lightheaded today, guys. Sorry I'm not thinking too clearly, but yeah, this is the prediction. As I said before, Cuomo would do miserably in this prediction. I think that he would have about a 20% chance of winning in this prediction, and Trump would have an 80% chance of winning, as you can see by this bar. I think that Cuomo has potential to take states like Colorado, maybe Michigan, maybe New Hampshire, maybe parts of Maine, maybe Nevada. But with that said, Trump also has a chance of taking New Mexico and Virginia. So the pathway to victory for Cuomo is very, very slim. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys would like to see any more videos in the future, please leave a suggestion down below. This video was suggested, I believe it was by RJ Weber. I'm not entirely certain about that, but I'm pretty sure it was. So if you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like, share, comment, subscribe. It's the only way for small channels like mine to grow. I'm sorry about the audio. I'll get that fixed hopefully soon. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the video. See ya.